Hello everyone, and welcome to the ACFR Blue Card Command System Overview. As many of you may have heard, we are looking to implement some of the Blue Card Command system that was implemented by Alan Brunacini and his sons in Phoenix, Arizona, and Phoenix Fire Department, which this has become a accepted and widely used practice across the United States in the fire service for a good way for level 4 and level 5 incident management systems for NIMS ICS to be utilized. So what we're going to go over are just some of the key concepts, some of the terms you'll hear to kind of give you an overview for all personnel. So when they hear this, it's not a total foreign subject to them, and they'll understand a little bit more. And as we move further through the next progressions of training, different levels of officers and responders will get different levels of training to meet the needs of the department and for them on these different incidents. So we want everybody to get just an overview at first to learn a little bit more about what is the Blue Card Command system. So some of the key Blue Card concepts and the big things are there are 8 standard command functions and the 8 functions of command. Number 1 being deployment, and that's how to dispatch and send the units and for them to show up on scene, how they gather. The other one is the assumption, confirmation, and positioning of command. So actually making sure that we set up that command. How to evaluate a situation to make the proper incident action plan, which leads us in what is the actual strategy and incident action planning that comes into how to mitigate that incident and situation. Number 5 is the key part of this is communications, and it's one of the things that's driven this training, and the need for this is that communications aspect. The other part is 6, organization. How do we organize this incident as it gets to either much more intricate and much more complex, or as it simplifies, how do we organize it to downgrade that? And then we also look at review, evaluation, revision of the plan and the strategies in which we're using, and then how to continue support and terminate command, which is number 8. So the number 1, or the first command function, is deployment. And the major goal is to make sure that we provide and manage a steady and adequate timely stream of the appropriate resources, and resources being apparatus, personnel, and equipment to the scene so that we can safely manage and mitigate whatever hazards we have to come across. So there's really 2 different statuses that companies fall into on the incident scene, and this is really important for us to realize this to help reduce freelancing and to help to manage these scenes for the commanders. And that's either you're unassigned or you're assigned. And if you're unassigned to the incident or have an unassigned status at that incident, you're either staged, you're in rehabbing, or you're rehabbed and ready to go, maybe on deck. And we'll learn more about that. Whereas assigned, or getting ready for on deck, I should say, when you're assigned, you're either the first unit to a location, you're assigned to a section or sector or division, or if you're on deck in a sector or division, or you're recycling in a sector and division. And we'll talk about the difference between recycling and rehabbing and what that means to an incident commander and those running the scene. So level 1 staging, as we hear, the level 1 and level 2, but level 1 applies to all initial responders on a first alarm box assignment. So these are your first initial units responding that are sent out on that initial page. So if it is a structure fire and it's our 3 engines, district chief, a tower or a tanker, rescue, those units will go if they're not assigned and have an assignment at level 1 staging. And that first engine, truck company, and DC respond directly to the scene. If we don't have a ladder or a truck company, then probably what we'll look at is having the first 2 engines report directly to the scene with the district chief, and all other units would be level 1 staging. This in time will do away with the on-scene reporting to command, as we hear now, and get on a common term of we're either assigned on scene or level 1 stage or level 2 stage. It immediately goes into effect after that initial radio report from the IC number 1. And that IC number 1, as we'll learn more, is that initial commander, or that fast acting commander sometimes as it's called, is that initial engine on scene who has taken incident command. Once that's happened and the command is established, then level 1 staging should be in effect. And all subsequent arriving units will go stage 1 block away in their direction of travel, being careful not to pass their last tactical option, meaning a place for utilities or catching a hydrant for water supply, whatever the case may be. Level 2 staging, this is going to be in effect for greater alarms. And when we get level 2 staging established, the first engine that is sent out on that second alarm or third alarm, the first engine that's sent out and gets to level 2 staging typically becomes that initial staging officer for level 2 staging. And then we upgrade that with the staff if possible. And the IC should designate the staging location, requesting an additional alarm or a box unit for that. So if we have level 2 staging, it's usually given a separate area, a location where level 2 staging should be, and usually a separate radio channel should come with that too. So it usually will require also a helper at the incident command post there to manage that logistics channel for that secondary staging, that level 2 staging, and to pull units in as the commander needs. So obviously this is going to be for a larger unit or a larger incident, or an incident that may be going on for a greater amount of time, which we have more personnel, more command staff, and that available as well. So on deck. So you hear the term on deck during Blue Card, and the way to think of on deck, the best way, is basically a forward staging. We have level 1 staging for our apparatus and personnel who are coming in if they're not given an assignment. Level 2, if they're on that second alarm or third alarm, greater alarms, waiting for assignment in the staging area. And on deck is for those personnel who are on scene, may be pulled in and put on deck to stage in the warm zone just outside the hot zone for personnel. Typically in the past we've had RIT teams, or you may have somebody else there, in which the on-deck team, the on-deck crews will work in that capacity, and we'll talk about that a little bit more too. So when you hear the term on deck, it's basically, if you think about it in a baseball term, if you're on deck, you're that next batter up. You're not the one in the batter's box. You're not the one up to bat. You're not in the dugout. You're kind of in between the dugout and the batter's box. You're sitting there, you're on deck. So when that person either hits or strikes out, you're the next one up. So the on-deck crew options, once that crew is assigned to an on-deck position, they are first and foremost a rapid intervention crew, a RIC or a RIT team, until they are assigned to either relieve an existing crew in their assigned division, to reinforce a current position in their assigned division, so maybe they need a second hose line in there, or to cover a new position as assigned by the IC. So on deck is the rapid intervention crew unless they're reassigned, and if they're assigned to something else to replace somebody or move to a different position, then we move somebody else in on deck to become that rapid intervention crew. So it tends to do away with having a designated rapid intervention crew, however, it does still cover that function. So those tools, those equipment, all the stuff that you would use possibly for a rapid intervention crew may be staged on that Division Charlie or Division Bravo on that area. And as crews move up on deck, they're there with that equipment. However, these functions can change. Recycling. So what's the difference between recycling and then rehab or rehabilitation? So a recycle, we used to call it just a bottle change. It's a timely and efficient means of air replacement and rehydration of assigned companies while still maintaining their section or division. So you don't actually leave where you're assigned. You may come out on that Charlie division, get a couple of, get your bottle changed, grab some hydration from fluid or whatever may be the case, and move right back to being on deck. So with our SOP saying, 2 bottles, after 2 bottles we go to rehab. So if you finish your first bottle, come out, somebody replaces you who was on deck, they go in, you come out and recycle, being ready to go back in with your second bottle when that section or division commander, leader, or the incident commander puts you back in. So you're not fully coming out, you're not fully deconning and taking yourself out of the mix like you would in rehab. So rehabilitation is an assignment to a formal rehab location, usually close to the emergency scene, where you be deconned, and this is using our green bucket. So you come out, you're hosed off, you doff your equipment, medically evaluated, rehydrated, so we make sure we check our blood pressures, our pulses, that kind of stuff. And once we're rehab, we can be reassigned to the incident scene again, but most of the time you may be placed back in service to go on about your day. So rehab is towards the end of the event, or once you are done with that incident, rehabbed and let loose. So part of this deployment and what they look at is thinking about the 3 deep deployment model. So 3 deep, what does that mean? Well, you actually have companies that are working right there in that hot or warm zone. So that's going to be your first and foremost, your incident level. And then your next level to the 2 deep would be your IC or your on-deck crews. So you may have, as it shows here, Quint 23 on deck, Engine 29 on deck. These are companies that are ready to go in and replace Engine 24, Engine 21, and Rescue 24 as their air consumption reaches a lower amount, or they may have to come out and rehydrate, something to that nature, or to go in and act as a RIT team. And then the 3 deep is having units in level 1 staging, units that are outside ready to come into the scene as needed, and off to the side. So they're staged in their units, ready to go to either stage their apparatus out of the way or bring their apparatus to the scene, depending on what the needs are, and bring their personnel. So you have companies working in the hot zone, on deck companies, and companies in staging. So when we get into talking about Blue Card 3 deep deployment model, this is what they're talking about. All right, the biggest part of the Blue Card command is the establishment of that command presence on any incident manager or incident scene, because it's crucial in most of the NIOSH line of duty deaths that have looked, that communications and lack of the incident command have been attributed to a lot of firefighter deaths. So it's one of the big things that they're pushing for. So in this part, in this function of command, we look for the assumption, confirmation, and that position of command. And that major goal, again, is to quickly establish and confirm a single incident commander and to place that IC in the most effective command position. And it's very important to realize we have one incident commander. We may have command staff, we may have division or sector, whatever you want to call, leaders and groups that will help to function within that incident management, but there's only one incident commander, and it's important to establish that soon and early. So selection of the proper command position. 100% of the time on these incidents, we're going to have that IC number 1, which is that fast-acting company officer who should establish command 100% of the time, especially if we have more than 2 units responding. About 15 to 20% of the time, we'll actually get a DC, district chief level position on scene to be that incident commander number 2, and then less than 5% of the time will we have an IC, should be number 3, with an incident management team in that level. So you have IC number 2. I'm sorry, you have that level 2 incident commander. So the district chief in that, and then an incident management team that comes in. This is other command staff who will help with operations, logistics, whatever the case may be, planning, financing. All that could actually come into play here, depending on the length, duration of the incident, or the size of the incident. It may even house a unified command post where we may have other agencies and jurisdictions coming in. All right, so situation evaluation. This is another key concept for the incident commander, because we have to use and develop a regular approach to the size up using standard information management forms and critical incident factors. So we have to look at these critical incident factors to determine what is our incident action plan going to be? What are our strategies to mitigate this? So we talk about these factors. We're going to look at fixed factors and then variable factors. So we're going to consider fixed factors, and these are things that are not necessarily going to change, or these are the knowns, and we're going to try to manage the variable factors with this. So the fixed factors are going to be the building itself. What type of construction is it? What size is this building? What type of materials are in it? What is the occupancy? Is it a high occupancy, high risk occupancy? And what are the arrangement of the building? Is there a conflagration hazard? Is there a lot of access issues? So these are fixed factors, where variable factor is going to be, what about the fire? What's the location of the fire? What's the size of the fire? What type of fire is it? What's the life hazard? What are the resources we have available? What are the actions that we're taking in any special circumstances? These are variable factors that are going to lead to the successful completion and mitigation of this incident, or if we don't manage these in the right direction, it could cause further disruption and poor management of this incident. So that once we have those fixed factors, and we have incident command in place, we have to come up with that strategy and incident action plan. We've looked at everything, we've done our size up, looking at this. Now we have to make that systemic approach. We have to take that systemic method to make basic strategy decisions and develop and initiate that tactical incident action plan. So that we use this, and we talk about this in Blue Card as being the strategic. So we talk about this in Blue Card as being the strategic decision-making model. And in the strategic decision-making model, we're going to take those critical fireground factors, and those are our fixed and variable factors. We're going to look at a risk management plan. What are the risks? What are the benefits? Then we're going to say, what's our strategy? So strategy, what are we looking to do here? How are we going to mitigate this? Is it going to be offensive, defensive? Are we going to mitigate an exposure first? What's the problem here? Set up that incident action plan, and then figure out what our tactical priorities are based on our SOGs. So we'll establish those tactical priorities and have the task level assignments made to follow that incident action plan that will follow into our strategy, following the consideration of risk management and those critical fireground factors. So the risk management plan that they talk about, and it's very key, and why we do this is to determine how much risk are we willing to take. And Blue Card says, we will risk our lives a lot to save savable lives. And that's a hard thing, with a lot of things we've been discussing lately. What is the savable life? If we know there's somebody in there and we've had contact with them, and they're on the phone, then that is considered to be a savable life. So we will risk a lot. We risk our lives a little in a highly calculated manner to save savable property. So if there's property we can save, we can risk our lives a little, but we're going to do this in a highly calculated manner to make sure that we're staying safe, that we're efficient and following our training to make sure that we can best make sure everybody goes home. And we will not risk our lives at all for what's already lost, people or property. So if we are into that point where it's a defensive strategy, where there's no way that they're survivable people or the property is that far gone, then we do not need to risk our lives at all for what's already lost. We don't need to have firefighters die for rubble and building and things that are going to be torn down anyway. So the IC should use the incident's critical factors in the risk management plan to determine that overall strategy. Is it going to be an offensive or inside fire attack or incident mitigation, or are we going to go defensive in that strategy? Are we going to stay outside, operate from a safer area, and keep it from spreading to further conflagrations or other buildings or structures, what may be in harm's way? So that incident action plan then has to be implemented to match that overall strategy. So if we have an offensive incident action plan, we need to think about rescue. All right, if there's a victim in there, how do we rescue this victim? What's the best way? Do we put the fire out to best save them, or do we need to formulate a rescue plan first to protect and get that person out? What about fire control, loss control, and then customary stabilization? What kind of things are we going to stabilize? How are we going to stabilize this? Or if we get to this defensive incident action plan, like the picture you see on the right, we're going to have to establish possible cutoffs. At what point do we cut our losses and say, okay, we're going to give up this building, and this is where we're going to make our stand? We have to define that hazard zone of where we're going defensive. We may go offensive in one portion of a strip mall, but defensive on the other end. So there's things like that. How do we search the exposures and how do we protect those exposures? It's a different incident action plan for that defensive strategy than if we were in that offensive strategy. All right. Communications. The key thing is going to be to this, and we foresee that there'll be some definite protocol or SOG changes in the future when we start talking about some of the things that come up with this, and that's the communications on the fire ground. And the key thing is that all hazard zone communications are on one TAC channel, and that's important for that incident commander to have that. We have everybody on one TAC channel and stay within that span of control. And the major goal here is going to be to provide for the clear and timely sharing of critical incident information to all responders. If there's a mayday called or there's something that's happened, it's important that everybody on that fire ground hear that and understand that that's the issue. So to do that in communications, one of the things that we do now and that we need to reiterate and we'll talk about as we move this forward is the order model. And that order model is the sender contacts the receiver. This is the "Hey you, it's me." The receiver states that readiness to receive, and then that sender transmits the message or the order. So we have to say, "Hey you, it's me." Let that person or that unit acknowledge you and then transmit that message. And then the receiver briefly restates that message to confirm that understanding of the message, and then the sender has the opportunity to correct any misunderstandings of the message. So this order model is important, extremely important, in order to make sure that we don't get mixed signals and confusion on the fire ground. And that properly following the order model reduce that overall amount of radio traffic, enhance the accountability process, and prevent deployment mistakes and directional mistakes and freelancing. So there's 6 basic types of radio transmissions on a hazard zone, and that's going to be our initial radio reporting, which is that initial arrival report. Then there will be a follow-up report after the 360 is done to make sure we're going to continue with that first actions that we're told, and if there's any changes that came up that we found during the 360. And then assigning units to operating positions or functions within the incident, command transfers, and C.A.N reporting, as we call that. And those are conditions, actions, or needs, and then strategic shifts if we move from offensive to defensive or defensive to offensive. So these are important to realize that this is what should be followed to minimize fireground traffic. As much as it can be done face-to-face in these different areas is the best way to do it. So as we move to that initial radio report, there's a good tactical sheet here to follow, and we'll go through this more with training, is to follow this status. So when you get on scene, you'll give a size, the height, the occupancy type, describe the problem, what's the smoke or fire conditions and the location, and then what's that initial action plan going to be? What's the task, what's the location, and the objectives? So all these things will be given, they call TLOs, when you give a unit an assignment, that there's the task, the location you want that task, and what's the objective of that task. And declaring the strategy, either offensive, defensive. What's your resource determination? Do you need to continue the resources you have? Can you handle with what you have on scene? Or do you need to strike a second or even a third alarm? And then assume or name the command. And if we follow these and take that time and that initial radio report to set this in place, it takes a little bit of time at first to put it in place, but once it's said, it will decrease a lot of the radio traffic and confusion is what needs to be done next. So let's look at the first, the building area description. So we're going to look at the size, height, and occupancy type. So the size, we're going to make it easy. No more 12,000 square foot, 2,300 square foot. We're not a really good judge of that. So we're going to talk about size as being small, medium, large, or mega. And then we'll talk about the height. What's the number of stories above ground? And what's the occupancy type? Is this residential? Is it apartment? And we'll talk about apartment complex versus an apartment building. Is it a commercial strip mall, an assembly, or the name? Is it a Walmart? Is it a CVS? Is it a Taco Bell. When we know what these different buildings look like, we can use the names of them to better put it in our head as to what they are. We're also going to describe the problem. There's 4 standard narratives to describe that fire conditions. It's either nothing showing, light smoke showing, a working fire, or defensive fire conditions. We also talk about geographic landmarks, and this generally is going to talk about the Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta side of the structures. And for most of our cases, the address side of the occupancy is going to become the Alpha side, and they are named in a clockwise fashion after that. If for some reason the address side is not the Alpha side, then we just make sure we delineate that and state it early on and make sure it stays that way throughout the incident. But we need to make sure we say Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, and Delta rather than A, B, C, and D, because B, C, and D can sound very similar on the radio, especially when somebody's with masks on or on air, and that kind of thing can create some communication error. In longer strips and rows and apartments, when we have exposures, you may have the main fire occupancy as the Alpha occupancy, with the Bravo 1, Bravo 2, Bravo 3 exposures going down the Bravo side of that, and Delta 1, Delta 2, Delta 3 exposures moving further down on the Delta side of that main fire occupancy. This standardizes this. On multi-story buildings, we have floor 1, 2, 3, and 4 that moves upstairs, and then floor 01, floor 02 as they go down into a basement. So as we talked before about that initial incident action plan and assigning the units, we need to make sure that they are giving a task, a location, and an objective. If I was to assign engine 24 to bring an 1 3/4 line through the Alpha side to go to the 2nd floor for fire extinguishment and search and rescue, then that tells them the task is to bring a line to the 2nd floor, location where? To the 2nd floor, and the objective is to search and rescue, look for victims, and any fire extinguishment that they may need. So we make sure we give that task, location, objective versus engine 24, take a line to the 2nd floor. That doesn't really give everything that we're looking for them to do. So resource determination. This forces that initial arriver to do the task and the math before entering the hazard zone, right? It makes us look at what are we actually going to need? What do we think? Do we need to cancel the assignment? Do we hold the assignment, have units respond non-emergent, or do we hold the assignment and have everybody continue emergency? Or then do we strike additional alarms if we need? So after we've done that initial incident action plan and our initial arrival report, we've talked about the building, the number of stories, what's showing, what tasks are being done, what resources we need. We name command. We then begin our 360. And then once we do our 360, we need to be able to look now and say, have things changed? How many stories are in the rear of this structure? What is the basement? What type of basement? What's the problem if it's different? If we're now seeing the smoke and we see that there's actually a fire in the basement, do we want to send units in that Alpha side with that charged hose line like we originally stated? So if we change this, there's immediate dangers to life safety, or there's other hazards, we need to give a follow-up report after our 360. We then need to announce, where's accountability going to be? Where's the unit going to be on the Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta side where we'll collect our PAT tags? Or we know exactly if engine 81 is on the Alpha side, we'll establish engine 81 as the Alpha side accountability. And then any other immediate safety concerns, electrical drops, a pool, some sort of propane tank or whatever may be the case there. So portable radio reporting, there's a few things that we should do with our portable portable radio reporting. Will be routine traffic on the fire ground, roof reports, status changes, priority traffic, and emergency traffic. So let's talk about what some of these are. Routine radio traffic is going to incorporate what happens on the fireground scene. We need to remember, and we should have radio silence once you're assigned to the scene, and let the communications be driven by the incident commander. We use the order model that we talked about, and there's no good news reporting. If they've assigned you to go in the alpha side for suppression, we don't need to give a step along the way or give an announcement that we're going to the front door, that we made it 30 feet in, that we found fire. We want to look at conditions, actions, and needs, and look at when something changes, when that needs to change. If it's a significant status change, or the incident commander asks for your conditions, actions, needs, then you will give that. No good news reporting. This will be a change for us. Priority radio traffic, and this is radio traffic to the incident commander for red flag information. You're inside, you're assigned to pulling ceilings, we're looking at it, and you find heavy fire above your head, and you find it in the attic area. That is a priority traffic to let the incident commander know that, hey, this fire's above our head and in the attic space or in some sort of a void space, and we need to look at how we're handling this. The sender can break into the order model, and it's important tactical information that will require adjustments to that current incident action plan, or maybe even the strategy. Maybe at this point we realize that the roof system is gone and we need to pull out and go to a defensive strategy until we can safely take care of this. So that info usually affects the entire operation of things. So emergency radio traffic. This is for units and sections and divisions, and it's priority traffic only to the IC. So units will talk within their sections, divisions, priority traction only to the IC. And then emergency traffic is only initiated by the IC. When emergency traffic's needed, the IC will let dispatch know they need emergency traffic. They'll process tones out for everybody to hear and announce that there's emergency traffic on this so-and-so channel. And then the alarm dispatch center plays a critical part. In emergency radio traffic, when we do this, it will be maintained until the IC clears that. Emergency radio traffic is used when we're switching from an offensive to a defensive strategy to let all units know that we're changing the strategy, that we're moving to a defensive mode, and that all units need to exit or evacuate or even abandon the structure. And we'll talk more about those as we get deeper into the training. And then when they're outside, conducting the PAR checks. Once all units are PAR and everybody's accounted for, then the emergency traffic can be halted, and we'll go back to resuming normal radio traffic. So organization of these units, and the major goal in Blue Card in this function of command is to develop an effective incident organization using that sector division group system to decentralize and delegate geographic and functional responsibility. So the incident commander, instead of trying to handle Engine 24, Engine 81, Squad 23, Quint 23, and these different units in different areas, they may establish somebody as the operations sector, or it could be Division Alpha or Division Charlie. And then all units assigned to Division Charlie or to the roof sector would report to that incident or to that commander of that division, and then the incident commander would only talk to those division, sector, or group leaders. So remember, there's the 3 operational levels in all incidents that have an IDLH hazard zone. There's those task level operations, and that's the boots on the ground. Then there's that tactical level, which will be our section, division, group leaders, who are at that tactical level making sure that the tasks are being done. And the strategic level is the incident commander. They will come up with a strategy and employ that onto their sub-commanders or sub-leaders to find the tactics that need to be done to accomplish that strategy. And no operational level can perform the functions or the responsibilities for any other level. The chief should not be in there moving hoses. The incident commander, I should say, once it's established after that, a fast attack commander should not be in there moving hoses, triaging patients, They should be finding the strategy, whereas the tactical section division group leaders should not be making the strategic decisions for the entire scene. So once this is done, we have to review, evaluate, and revise our command and confirm that the current incident action plan is meeting the tactical requirements and that it adequately provides for the safety of the workers, and to identify and address any areas that are not covered. That's why we look at this at the end. So are we meeting what we need to do? So the system safety requirements for any extended offensive operation, should be that there's one IC from the onset, and then everyone operates within the IC's plan, which should be SOP driven. Call for these required resources early. An initial action devoted to fire control and to support search operations. We cover and assign all required tactical positions. We make sure if there's a tactical position that needs to be filled for the safety, that we fill that early, and that strategic incident commander is in place within 5 to 7 minutes. So we're then pulling that incident commander from that fast acting and get a strategic incident commander in place early. And then command officers in tactical positions later on within 10 minutes. Expert field command within 10 minutes, or expect field command within 10 minutes, and revise that plan accordingly. And then later arriving units will be on deck positions. We layer them and talk about our 3 deep model. If we have to reinforce that attack more than once, so if you have a line going to the second floor and you call for a second line in to back you up, or for another line, and that's still not sufficient, and you call for a third line, that's a red flag, and we need to look at moving to defensive operations. And the IC should continually evaluate and adjust that incident action plan as required. So when we continue support and terminate our command, the big thing is to provide the required duration of command necessary to complete the tactical priorities, standardize how that command is transferred, and then ensure that operations are safely concluded. So again, we want to make sure that we assume that command early on from that initial fast acting leader, transfer it and upgrade it to a district chief or strategic tactical level commander, and then maybe even further on to an incident management team as we get further. And remember that as we do command transfer, that this goes both ways. As we move up to these different levels of command, we'll also move back down from these levels of command as the incident becomes stabilized and mitigated. So these are just some of the things and some of the terminology that you'll see in Blue Card. We want to give you an overview. There'll be more to follow, so there will be district drill type training coming out here in May, to which all units and personnel will get at the station, and then company officers and fire lieutenants will be getting further training to practice some of these initial command, initial incident arrival reports, transfer of command, 360 reports, and learning more about Blue Card and how it should better our communications and provide for safe fire incident ground operations for these level 4 and level 5 incidents. So hopefully this was a good overview and piques your interest, so stay tuned to what's to follow. Until then, be safe, and we'll talk to you soon.